This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, episode 72. Steve Rayson. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 72 of Experts in the Wire. This episode might be a little unorthodox. We're going to focus on growth, but it's actually the growth of a marketing tool we all know and love called BuzzSumo. Yes, they have been our sponsor for a few episodes, but this episode happened totally organically outside of that. And in fact, we're mostly going to chat about BuzzSumo, the company, rather than BuzzSumo, the tool, although we're going to talk about the tool a little bit. Many episodes you may have heard on Experts are the direct result of me seeing an article and then usually in about 5 to 10 seconds knowing I want to have that guest on the show. Such episodes were with Dave Gerhardt talking about Drift and Tyler Hakes talking about College Raptor. It's usually because the story is unique, unconventional, or both. And speaking of sponsors, you're going to hear more about BuzzSumo, the tool, later today, and also Local Visibility System shortly. But before that, before we meet Steve, I want to read a quick quote, Steve, if you don't mind, from your article. And it said, "We have no illusions about turning BuzzSumo into a unicorn. BuzzSumo will never be a billion-dollar business. This does not mean we are not successful, just that we have different objectives and ambitions. We are a donkey and proud of it." So I'm excited to chat about BuzzSumo the donkey. Not only do I want to talk about that, but we're going to talk about a little bit about content marketing and what makes content successful. It's something that Steve and the folks at BuzzSumo have obviously spent a bit of time studying as well. So Steve, it's great to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, no, thanks. And very nice to be here today.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time at 8 p.m. there in the UK to chat with me today. So Steve, I just wanted to ask real quick first about your background. I'm trying to figure out sort of your path on LinkedIn. It said, I believe you had a degree in politics. Is that right?
Economics and politics, my first degree. So I'm still really quite interested in politics and follow all the debates. And we just had a general election here and I do loads of data crunching to understand it. But I started doing a degree in economics and politics. I then worked as a management consultant for a company now called KPMG. It was called Pete Marwick when I was there. I'm that old. Changed its name a few times since then. But I then set up and ran a couple of e-learning companies, which we sold before I moved on to BuzzSumo.
Excellent. So how did you end up making the transition into business and marketing? Did you get a particular job at some point? Was it something you proactively pursued? How did you end up into the marketing side of things?
It's interesting, really. I had a job. I was the director of finance in an organization, and I engaged a local startup in Brighton in the UK. And I really liked what they were doing. And I just literally happened to be chatting to their chief exec one day saying, there's loads of potential here. E-learning is really going to take off. You should really, focus on this sector. And one thing led to another, and I left the company and went to join them. My wife was less keen because it meant giving up a safe job, going to work for a relatively small startup. But it happened to work out all right. But it was really my passion. It was the early days of the internet. And that seems odd now. But for someone at my age, back in 97, 98, the internet was still very new. And I was just very keen to get involved in it, really, and saw lots of potential. So, in retrospect, it was a brave move, but it worked out very well for me.
And so now the title you have at BuzzSumo is director. That's what it says on the website. So what is that? What is your day-to-day involved with BuzzSumo?
Yeah, director is a slightly odd title. I mean, basically, when I sold my last e-learning company, I was locked out of working in e-learning, the way it works these days. And so I was looking for something else to do, and I came across BuzzSumo online, a really early version. It's developed by two guys, my two partners now, Henley and James, and they take all the credit for it. It was their idea. They came up with the idea around it. But I really loved what they were doing. At that stage, it was fairly simple, just searching for the most shared content, simple sort of social search engine. And I thought it had potential. So I approached them and said, look, I'd really like to turn this into a business. Are you interested? And it took me a while to persuade them to give up their jobs and join this mad old man and set up a company. But so it was an interesting route, really. I found it online. I really liked what they were doing, and I approached them and said, "Are you guys interested in turning this into a business?" They'd never met. Henley's in New York, James is in London. They were really doing it as a hobby. As I say, it took a little bit of time, I think, to persuade them to turn it into a business, but I'm glad we did.
So John and Henley at BuzzSumo had never met, and this was just a hobby, and it was your idea to turn this into a company? I never knew that.
Yeah, it's James and Henley, not John. Sorry, James.
Oh, I'm sorry, James. Yep.
Yeah, James and Henley. Yeah, they'd not met. I mean, they'd met online, but they'd not met physically. So literally, James and I flew to New York. We met Henley and just talked through how we might turn it into a business and things. And I was happy to sort of bootstrap that in terms of some initial funding behind it. Yeah, so it's probably an unusual story, really. But yeah, we got together, we got on well, and and then we launched the company. First paid plan was in September 14.
Yeah, that was in the fall of 2013, correct? That you went out to New York and met James and Henley?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I met them at the end of 13. We set up the company in March 14, and we launched the first paid product in September 14. So it probably took about a year to get to our first paid product on the market.
What did you see in that early version of BuzzSumo that excited you so much to fly all the way to New York and present to them this business idea?
I think it's just happened to be, I started using the tool, and it's something I started using every day. And Google's great for, if I want to find articles on e-learning, but what BuzzSumo was giving me was, what are my peers sharing today, last week? So what are the most shared articles? What's gaining traction at the moment? And so I started just using it every day. I was really interested in what articles were gaining traction. Why were they gaining traction? Was it because of the headline? Was it because who's sharing them, etc.? So I just got really interested in the data, and it was something that I used every day. And I'm thinking, if I'm using it every day, then there's potential in this for other people to want to use it as well. So that's where I came from. It passed that initial test of, this is a tool I'd like to use every day.
It is super interesting because many tools and companies are people trying to brainstorm what's going to be successful or make revenue. And this just happened organically, it seems like. Do you know where James and Henley got the idea for BuzzSumo?
I think it emerged a bit organically. I think Henley came up initially with the idea, started indexing content and putting it into a database and a search engine to see what was the most shared. So I think it probably started there. But I think James had worked in SEO. So James, Henley worked for a financial company. James had worked in SEO. So James saw the potential from an agency perspective, looking at it in terms of SEO, what was gaining traction. So it really was organic, I think. There was no big business plan saying, let's just build this tool. And then I came along and said, I think we could add this and we could do that. And so I put a bit of funding to enable the guys to give up their jobs and for us to get the thing off the ground. And to say, it just took off from there, really. It took off organically. And most of the new features that we've added actually came from our users. We had a freemium, and we still have a freemium product. And so pushing it out there freemium, and initially it was obviously a beta freemium, but we just got so much feedback from people saying, this is great, could you do this, could you do that? And then we just assessed all the various requests. Obviously you get far too many, but we said, actually, that's a really good idea. And some of the best ideas on BuzzSumo all came from our user base, really. Like the trending content dashboard, which lots of people love. That wasn't our idea. A client said, you're tracking social shares, could you just show me what's trending? And we're saying, yeah, we can do that. We could show you what's trending in the last 5 minutes. So I said, okay, let's build a dashboard. So a lot of the nice features of BuzzSumo actually came from user requests. We don't have a monopoly on good ideas. They really came from our users.
How do you decide what requests to do? And I know this is something that Jason at Basecamp talks a lot about, and you mentioned them in your article. There must be a lot of incoming ideas from people using the tool. How do you decide which ones to actually spend the time, money, resources pursuing, and which ones don't get pursued?
Yeah, it is difficult because there are so many features, and you also get the people to be really wary of are the people who say, I'd buy your tool, Steve, if it only had this, because that's not normally true. We'd really just look at the requests and see whether we're getting that common request from others. So is it a feature that everybody would benefit from? And then we test it out with other users. So if it's a feature we think people would benefit from, we test it with others. But we're really looking at does it help our users, and does it fit with the core product? I mean, at our core, we're a content research tool. So lots of people say, Steve, it would be great. Could I schedule content with your tool so I can find great content, but I'd like to schedule it like Buffer or Hootsuite? Our view, that's not our game. We're not a scheduling tool. We're a content research tool. So we have to be fairly clear about what we're trying to do, and we don't want to get into that product bloat because there is the danger that you can just move into different directions. So we're very focused we're a research tool. That's what we're about, really. And so we look at, what helps us really. And often it's about getting data. Fundamentally, we collect data and then we give you access to data through BuzzSumo. So we're really a data company. We just crawl, we collect data, we give you then access to search and analyze that data. So we've added new features, like we've just added a question analyzer feature, which is coming out, which is just crawling all the questions being asked across forums. Again, that's data, so you can type in a topic, it can be any topic, SaaS pricing, and we'll show you all the questions that have been asked across Reddit, across multiple forums. So it's a form of data, or a bit like our alerts are a form of data, really. So we're quite conscious that we're a research tool, we're focused on data. So requests that go too far beyond that, we try to steer a little bit clear of, really. So we're very conscious about having a very unique, small little space. It is a little small niche space that we're in, but we're very conscious it's our space. Content research is our space. We're not trying to be an all-embracing social media monitoring company or anything like that.
Awesome. And I do want to, we're going to move and talk about donkeys in a second. I'm just curious if you know where the name came from, because there's BuzzStream, and then there's Sumo, and then there's AppSumo, which are the same company. So were these homage to that, or not related?
Not really related. Again, I think Headley came up with the name originally. We have mixed views on it, but it's worked very well. I was a bit nervous because you said there's BuzzFeed, there's AppSumo.
Right.
There are so many others. There are so many buzzes out there. So we have built a little illustration character who, every time you see a blog post from us, you'll see our little Sumo character as a hand-drawn illustration. We have an illustrator in Hong Kong who does that for us, and that gives us a bit of brand recognition. But we obviously love what the guys at AppSumo were doing. We struggle a bit sometimes because we often get support requests for AppSumo through our support desk, people thinking we're the same company. So we do get a bit of crossover there sometimes. So we've been trying to make it clear we're very specifically BuzzSumo and trying to build our brand partly through the illustrations around our content as well.
So I want to set the stage as BuzzSumo. I'm going to make sure to get the right company name now. I get confused sometimes. As being a so-called donkey and not a unicorn. And we're going to talk about the growth in detail in a moment. But first, let's just set the stage. How big is BuzzSumo now employee-wise? Is it still less than 10?
Yeah, we've just taken on our first 2 people to help grow sales. So we're now up to 9 people. So we're up to 9 employees at this stage.
And so if I'm reading correctly, in the first year, the app earned $2.5 million in annual revenue with 160,000 users. And then this year, I think you said it's on track for $5 million annual revenue run rate. Is that correct?
Yeah, our annual revenue run rate is just over $5 million at the moment. And then we have a mix of customers. We have a freemium product. We have over 300,000 users now on the freemium product, which is really our marketing. And I'm a great believer in freemium and happy to talk about that.
Sure.
Some people say freemium doesn't work, but for us it works. It's our marketing. And we have probably just under 4,000 paying companies who use the product, and they have multiple users, for example. So we're on, as I say, an annual run rate of around $5 million, and we've just gone up to 9 staff. And we launched our first paid product, as I said, September 14. So we're coming up towards 3 years in terms of paid product.
So tell me a little about this myth of unicorns. I loved the article that you wrote. That's why I reached out to yourself and Henley to get you on the show. There's a thing going on, right, in SaaS companies and startup culture that people are chasing unicorns. But you've self-proclaimed built BuzzSumo as a donkey. So what is the myth of unicorns? And then what is the antithesis of that, which is the donkey?
Yeah, I suppose I get a little bit of frustration of mine really about unicorns and everybody desiring to be a unicorn at the moment. I call it sort of the unicorn orthodoxy. So you'll read so many articles about hypergrowth, super fast growth, how to be a unicorn, etc. It's very much in vogue. But there's a lot of mythology around it, as there is around unicorns, in the sense that unicorns by their nature are outliers. So if somebody really does make it, that's an outlier, really. So it's very difficult to draw lessons from outliers. It's very difficult to copy outliers. And I can talk about that in the context of content as well. So, they are really unusual beasts, the companies that become unicorns. And I think what people forget is, while some companies become unicorns, most people who adopt that route and adopt that strategy actually fail. So if you look at VCs who invest in companies to become unicorns, they're really hedging their bets. They'll invest in multiple companies because they know that a number of those companies aren't going to make it. They know a number of those companies are going to fail. And that's okay if you're a VC, and I don't have a problem with that. If you're a VC, that's the game, really. The problem is if you're actually one of the owners working for that company, you don't have the same way of spreading your risk. You're really committed. This is your life, your family, your house, whatever it happens to be. So adopting the unicorn approach can work incredibly well. You can raise funding, etc. But it's a much higher risk approach because very few companies taking that high growth approach actually succeed. And partly because it's dangerous because you're normally trying to grow revenues quickly rather than profitability. So you're normally burning cash. So you're a company that's burning cash. At some point you would run out of cash or you have another round of funding. It's a fairly high risk model. And it may be what you need if you really want to become a really huge company. But I suppose it was a reaction to me on that, which is really there are other ways of building companies that are very successful. I mean, I've previously built and sold 2 e-learning companies. Now, they weren't billions. The last company I sold, we were doing about $20 million of revenue when we sold it, but we built it, we bootstrapped it, we sold it for a good value. To me, that's successful. Yeah, we're not billionaires, but we made quite a lot of money out of that. And there are alternative routes which are lower risk than people just following this, what I would call the unicorn orthodoxy. So partly I wrote the article in response to that. Partly I was, it sort of corresponds with a guy called Rand Fishkin, who I'm sure you know, who was writing a book about experiences, and he discarded a title for his book. And he said, one of the titles I was thinking about was Blinded by Unicorns. And that really struck with me. I'm thinking, yeah, that's right. Some people are blinded by this unicorn orthodoxy. And actually, there are other good ways to grow a business. So that's where that article came from. And then I talked about what that means for us in practical terms, in terms of being a donkey as opposed to being a unicorn.
I'm curious, towards the beginning of the article, you called yourself sad for reading lots of SaaS articles. Was that tongue in cheek? I'm curious what you meant by that.
I suppose because I suppose I'm not subject. I think there are lots of people like me who just devour everything that comes out really on those sorts of articles. So I'm keen to improve my business and keen to know how I can do it better. So I read lots and lots of articles, and it was then I was thinking, just seeing so many of these articles about unicorns, and there's a sense of feeling of failure if you're not a unicorn, because all these people got super high growth. We're not going to be Salesforce, all those sorts of things. They are exceptional. They're very unusual. So I suppose it was slightly tongue-in-cheek. I read masses of articles about these things, but equally, I think it's not just me. I think lots of other people growing their own businesses, we all become passionate about it. So we do read a lot of articles about it. Although I have to say these days, I probably read a lot less than I did before.
And so in the article, you also say maintaining growth is hard as a donkey. So I want to ask why, and then we're going to talk about how specifically BuzzSumo has grown. But why is it hard to maintain growth as a donkey? Like in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, you're maybe growing slower. There's less big goals, and growth might seem easier, but counterintuitively, you're saying it's harder.
Well, I think it's just harder as you grow, really. And I think the reason it's hard as a donkey in the sense is that, my approach to being a donkey is let's quickly get to profitability. So let's get a self-sustaining business in place. So with BuzzSumo, by the end of year one, we were self-sustaining. We were making money. But the way we made money was we kept our costs down in terms of marketing and sales. Whereas if you're a unicorn and you raise funds, what your investors want you to do is to build your brand, spend a lot on marketing, a lot on sales. So literally, we're only in the last few months started to recruit her staff to help us on sales, because that's the easiest thing in some ways to trim back on. So I think that's what I mean, I think, in the sense that you knowing when to invest and when to grow your sales whilst at the same time remaining profitable. You have to generate enough cash flow to do that. I also think just seriously, as you get bigger, obviously it's harder to maintain your percentage growth rates. In the first year, it's easy because you're starting from a very low base. So you have a nice looking growth rate. As you get bigger, your monthly growth rate gets a lot harder, just as a prospect to scale, really. But I think fundamentally, as I think about, at what point do you invest in sales and marketing? How do you balance that with profitability, really? And I think that's the harder point when you're a donkey.
And one interesting thing I just want to note that I was thinking as you were talking about donkeys versus unicorns is I've done SEO or tried to do SEO for some companies that are trying to be unicorns. It is really tough. Like they have very, very high goals. It's very, very fast paced. And I found it definitely challenging. And in many cases, there's such a sense of urgency that happens to work against SEO in many ways. So I don't know if you've seen that same thing as well, that trying to run or create a unicorn company trickles down to everything that they do. And oftentimes I saw SEO, marketing, PPC, social media, whatever it is, be unsuccessful because they're going for such rapid growth, which is weird, but it's a counterintuitive result that I've seen happen sometimes.
Yeah, no, and I think I can see why that happens in a way, because a lot of marketing, and particularly content marketing, is basically it's a long run game, isn't it? We know there's no rocket science to content marketing. I think it's producing valuable content your audience likes, but you have to do it regularly and consistently to build an audience and to build a brand, and it just takes time. That's my experience. Now, you can try to short circuit a lot of that through marketing and spend, etc. But I think in the reality, the best content marketing, you build your brand over time. People trust the articles you write. They trust what you're doing. And I think just building an audience takes that amount of time, really. And unicorns, I think, do try to accelerate it. I think you're right. They can throw a lot of money at it, and they can also waste a lot of money trying to grow, particularly quickly, and to grow through marketing, etc. It's different to the way content marketing works. I think content marketing works much better if you know it's a long-term game. I mean, I, like you, I'm sure, advise people around content marketing, and they're saying, okay, within 2 months, we want to get so many more visitors. And I'm saying, look, this is 6 months, it's a year, it's possibly more than a year. I thought Mark Schaefer's new book about known was it can take you 18 months to become known. You have to build slowly, consistently, build a reputation. And people don't like it when you give them that response. But I think that's the reality of it, is these things, if you do them organically, they take time to do. You can try to accelerate them through spending lots of money. I'm not sure that always works. So I can see what you're saying. I can see why sometimes that may not work for people. Even if they've got lots of money to throw at things, it's not easy to build an audience and reputation quite quickly.
And now I want to check out that book, Known. That sounds very interesting. So let's talk about growth a little more specifically. So my first bullet point here is influencers. This is quite evidently, and it's mentioned in one of your posts, that this was a big source of growth for BuzzSumo. I'm curious, in terms of influencers, was this something that happened organically as well, or did you proactively reach out to people like Rand and Neil Patel and Noah Kagan and people that have shared? So how did that work?
It's a bit of both. We did have some people who really liked the product and just mailed us and said they liked the product. And I think Rand certainly was one of those who said really loved the product. But what we were quite keen to do is, when we did get people to do that, we would think, okay, we've got an advocate here, that's important. So we need to build the relationship with those advocates. But others we did reach out to. We just said, if we could get people advocating us, who would we get? And we made a list of, I don't know, no more than 20 people that we wanted to reach out to. We gave them access to BuzzSumo, said, what do you think? Tried to give them support, etc. And some of them we didn't hear from again, but others really liked it. But we did actively have a list of up to 20 people that we wanted to build relationships with. We actively did everything we could to help them, really. And we just said, how can we help you? Here's a version of the tool, have a play with it. Let us know if you need any data for your research, because we've got lots of data. Anything we can do to help, really. We promoted them where we could. And that helped us, because we didn't have budgets, because we weren't funded. We didn't have huge budgets to spend on marketing. In fact, I think the first few years we spent zero on marketing. I mean, absolutely zero. We didn't spend for ads or anything. And a lot of it came through influencer recommendations. And my view is about influencer marketing is you're not trying to get Neil Patel to mention you in a post or to mention you in a tweet. You're trying to build an advocate, because if you build an advocate, you get so much more. They'll mention you at events and webinars and other things. To me, influencer marketing is about building advocates. It's not about getting Rand to share a tweet, for example, as valuable as that may be. So that's what we were trying to do, is to try to build up a series of advocates, really. And we've continued to do that. We now run webinars we're very fortunate to run webinars with those people. So, we did one last week with Byron from Writer Access. We did one with Larry Kim the week before. We did a talk with Leoden, etc. So these are people who've been part of our sort of advocate sort of network. We don't pay them. They're people that we support, and they in return tended to support us. So influencer marketing has been a really big thing for us. I think it's enabled us to grow much faster than we would otherwise grow, because you sort of use their trust and reach. If they use your tool and they recommend it, you sort of leverage their trust and audience, which they've spent many years building as well. And you have to obviously reward that. But in terms of making sure that you use it wisely, you support them wisely. But yeah, so the influencer marketing for us was quite a big part of certainly our first 18 months or so as we grew as a company.
I get a ton of emails from companies with tools. So, and me and many people, I'm sure, develop a filter to that, a mental filter. How would you recommend, or how did you get BuzzSumo noticed in front of Rand or Neil or anybody that gets emails, like dozens or hundreds of emails a week or month? Is there anything that you did specifically to stand out?
I think one thing we have done to stand out, and I'm just in the middle of doing another one today actually, is that we have a lot of data. So we're indexing billions of posts, for example. We've got a database now going back 5 years of every article published on the web, how many shares it had, who shared it, etc. So we have a ton of data. So the way we differentiated a little was by doing research, because we had data that nobody else had, or very few people would have. So we did data, for example, so for Noah Kagan, OKDork, we did a review of 100 million articles in terms of what got shares, for example. And that ran on the OKDork site. It didn't run on our site. For Neil Patel, I mailed him and said, look, we can analyze 1 billion Facebook posts and say, what topics work best, what time of day, etc. Is that the sort of thing of interest? And we ended up then doing an analysis of 1 billion Facebook posts, and Neil wrote that up on his website, and I still think it's one of the top performing posts on his website. So we offered something slightly different, I think, which is research. We also don't request that obviously people mention us or anything like that. I think the starting point in any influencer relationship is, how can you help them? That has to be your starting point. Is how can you help them in terms of what they're doing? And the one thing we could do is we had data. So we could say, look, if you need data, we can help do that research for you. So subsequently, I did a piece probably 18 months ago now with Rand and Moz, where we looked at, is there a correlation between shares and links? So we took millions of posts. Yeah, we took millions of posts, and we did a very in-depth piece of research looking, is there a correlation? And the answer is there isn't a correlation. But it was a good piece of research, and Rand was interested in the research. So I think it's about, how can you help them? And it's not about firing off emails necessarily. Sometimes they read articles or they commented, but more often than not, they just dropped us a note saying, really like the tool. And then we picked that up. And so we said, okay, look, if we can help you in any way, do that. We didn't really mail lots of people. We also only targeted a very small group of influencers. And so I made sure I was commenting on their blog, sharing their content. So being visible and being as helpful as I could be to them, really. So I don't think you can do it with hundreds of people. I think you have a small focus group, if who's best placed to help you as an organization.
What's very interesting there is your focus on helping them actually gets the fact that your tool has so much data in front of them and probably worked the other way to pique their interest about BuzzSumo at the same time. So that helpful nature actually helped shine good light on BuzzSumo as well. And I'm curious, like, how, for other people, it seems like the takeaway is to use a strength that you might already have within your company as a part of getting in front of influencers to help them. Is that kind of the takeaway here, is to actually look at your own assets and like what you can bring uniquely to the table?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's what can you do to help them? What do you have? Because we all have something. Now, in our case, we have a lot of data, but you might have insights into a particular industry. You might have insights into particular companies. You might have particular case studies. We'll all have something which is of value, hopefully. So I think, yes, what do you have which is of value, which you can give, and I mean give to your influencers, expecting nothing in return, obviously hoping you might build a relationship through that. But what do you have which is helpful? And then you need to choose your influencers, because some of them are more interested in others in the type of the sort of help that you can provide to them, whether it's data or whether it's case studies or whether it's something else. But yeah, I think that was the takeaway for us, is just how can we help people? And as you say, by writing and doing in-depth research with them, we were able to then highlight BuzzSumo as well. In terms of, here's a company that's got a lot of data. You can actually access a lot of this data yourselves. So it works in a number of ways for us.
I'm curious about just the traffic in general and the channels that bring traffic to BuzzSumo. So if we were to open up your Google Analytics, what would we see? Is it mostly organic traffic, referrals? What are kind of the top sources of traffic for BuzzSumo?
Yeah, organic is really strong for us. And I think that's a lot of word of mouth recommendations through having a freemium tool, which I think is important. I think a lot of people recommend us to friends, colleagues, because we have a freemium version. You don't need a credit card or anything. You can just go, you can do unlimited searches on BuzzSumo, see the most shared content without ever paying anything. We just have the freemium version. But we also get quite a few referrals from people. And so that's quite important. I mean, in terms of what drives traffic when we run an event or when we run an article, etc., it's our email list. I would say the most important thing we have is our email list. Now, for us, because you have to sign up to the product, we get your emails. And we do get spam in that as well, so we still have to strip those out. But fundamentally, I'd say the strongest single marketing asset and channel we have is our email list. If I want to promote a post, so I'm going to publish this post, I've just been analyzing 100 million headlines and what we can learn about top trigrams, 3-word phrases, etc. And I'm aiming to publish that on Wednesday. But what will drive traffic to that post? Some of our social will drive it, some of our influencers will drive it, but fundamentally, it'll be an email to a segment of our email list that'll really drive that traffic.
Speaking of email lists, I'm going to quickly mention our first sponsor, Local Visibility System. We're going to get back to the growth of BuzzSumo in just a second, but Local Visibility System is a site by my friend Phil Rozek. Do you know Phil, Steve?
I don't know.
Phil is one of the best, if not the best, local SEO expert. He's been a friend of mine for a long time. He spoke at an event here. He was a guest on episode 5 of this podcast. So as a sponsor, he wanted me to mention that he has a whole ton of free local SEO resources at localvisibilitysystem.com. And then the URL is free local visibility resources with hyphens, or you can just go to his homepage. But you can download a free local SEO ebook. And that's why I tied in the email marketing there, because you'll also get on his email list where I imagine there's a lot of helpful local SEO information. So whether you need to hire somebody for local SEO or you just want to learn more about it, Phil's website, localvisibilitysystem.com, is the first place I always send people when they ask about local SEO. And if people want local SEO help, Phil is the first person I just click forward and I send the inquiries right to him. So that's localvisibilitysystem.com. You can check out all the local SEO resources. So Steve, I'm curious, for BuzzSumo, aside from influencers and having a premium model and a great tool, were there any other channels for exposure that BuzzSumo proactively pursued?
Yeah, I mean, the one that we still run is we obviously sponsor now a couple of podcasts, as you know, but the one that's worked well for us is doing joint webinars. And again, we try to pick people who have their own audience as well as us having an audience. And we do research often specifically for the webinar, so that we would then share it at the webinar. And so that's worked really well for us. I mean, often we'll get still 2,000 plus people register for a webinar. And where we're doing it with a partner, we're sharing lists there. They're reaching an audience, we're reaching an audience, and that gains us new exposure. So you'll see we have a webinars page on BuzzSumo, but at least every month, sometimes now twice a month, we run a webinar, and they're not selling BuzzSumo at all. In fact, I think the one we ran last week, we didn't even hardly mention BuzzSumo. It was just Byron from Writer Access talking about content strategy and stages of content strategy. They're really educational webinars trying to help our people be better at what they do, really. And I think that's worked well for us as well in terms of the brand of just trying to help people be educational, but also because we do them with a partner rather than run webinars on our own. Every webinar we're reaching a slightly different audience. And I think that's worked reasonably well for us, I think.
So as a software company, that's easy for me to wrap my head around. So you have software, another company has a software or online program. You collaborate together and do a webinar. How can other companies that maybe aren't in software, and I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but how can other companies maybe outside of SaaS think about maybe trying some collaborations with people in their industry to help get them exposure?
Yeah, I mean, it does have to be people who you're sort of cooperative with, I suppose, and not necessarily competitive with. But I think they can be case studies. They can be all sorts of things, really. It's, what are the questions people are asking in your industry? What are the issues they're struggling with? Can you partner up with somebody to talk through that issue? So we're always trying to think about, what is it our customers are having issues with? Is it content strategy? Is it amplification, influencer marketing? What is it? And who could we partner with to talk about some of those issues, really? So even if you're a consultancy company or something, I think you could look at partnering up with somebody to talk through some case studies or ideas. But I think the focus is on educational content. You don't want to be selling to them. And we make a clear point. We don't even have a call to action at the end of our webinars, which may be a bad thing. Someone said, you should really have a call to action. But we don't. We don't even have discount codes or anything at the end. We just leave it at the end, really, to saying, if you've got any questions, ask us. But they're really not promotional. I think that works reasonably well for us. But I think it's finding, what are the issues your audience is struggling with? Are there companies you could partner with to try to shed some light on those issues and help them? And often they're in the form of things like case studies, I think.
How would you characterize BuzzSumo, the brand? Is this something you think about? You mentioned a little bit earlier. I've noticed that for BuzzSumo, there's not as strong a positioning as personal brands as there is with a company like Moz with Rand, for example. So how do you think of BuzzSumo as a brand?
Yeah, I think one of the important things, and this goes back to my experience of I've set up and sold a number of companies before. I think you're not building a company per se, you're building a brand. And I know when I sold my last company, it was a company called Kineo, e-learning company. A large part of the value we got for that was because they wanted to buy the brand. So I think you've got to be thinking about, you're not just building a company, you are building a brand, which a buyer, on the assumption that you will want to exit at some point, that a buyer wants to be able to use and leverage that particular brand. So I've always thought about it in terms of a brand, and that's all the standard things like secure, have a brand that you can protect. So we're actually headquartered in the UK, although we have a US subsidiary company in BuzzSumo. But people often think we're a US company, but we're actually headquartered. The main company's in the UK. But the simple things are, have a brand that you can protect in other countries. So the first thing we do is we apply for the trademark. So we wouldn't have gone for BuzzSumo unless we could have secured the trademarks in the UK, US, Europe, etc. Because you need a brand that if somebody's going to buy it, they can protect it. So you have to think about those sorts of things. So you secure the URLs, you secure the trademarks, etc. And it's no point coming up with a brand like Catalyst, because you'll never be able to protect that brand in multiple countries. So you need a brand that's quite unique. But I think the other side of a brand is about tone of voice and what it's about. And for me, BuzzSumo, it's about being serious, research-driven, data-driven, independent, helpful. We always try to give away as much knowledge as we have, we give it away. So I do all this research on 100 million headlines, and we give it away. And for me, that means giving it away. We don't have gated content on our site. People have different views on gated content, and I do understand some people need to build email lists, but I personally hate gated content. I hate pop-ups that come on those websites telling me, sign up or remain stupid sort of thing. And I really dislike these things. We don't have gated content. My view is, I take a very strong view on this, which is, here's our content, it's free. If you like it, hopefully you'll think of us and you'll come back next time, or you might voluntarily subscribe to our email list, for example. But I think I read a book once called Love is the Killer App. I don't know if you've read that book. It's quite an old book now. And it basically says, give away your knowledge and the love will flow back to you. And I think that's true. And giving away your knowledge in exchange for an email address is not giving away your knowledge. So right. You're basically saying, here's an ebook. You can download it as long as we can then email you. I don't like that, so we give it away. So I have a very strong views about the brand of BuzzSumo, and even our sumo characters. Sumos can be aggressive sort of characters. Our sumo is a bit like Shrek, really. He's sort of thoughtful sumo, slightly large, lumbering sumo. There's something about the tone and the style that's quite important to us, and I suppose reflected in the article about being a donkey and not a unicorn. For me, there's something about our tone and our brand, which is it's not aggressive, it's not cutthroat. We are here to help. If you've got any questions, we will try and sort it out. We're a small, friendly company. So there is definitely something about the nature of our brand that we're trying to establish, and whether we get that across all the time, I don't know. And that's partly also why we have the freemium product. We're helpful. We're giving something back to the industry. Now, you can argue about it, but we do have 300,000 people who use our free tool. They get unlimited searches. It does cost us quite a lot to run hundreds and hundreds of servers to keep that service up, etc. But we provide that as a free service. I know a lot of people expect stuff to be free these days, but we do try to give back through the freemium product. We do try to give back through the research that we do. We make it freely and openly available to people. So to me, that's all part of our particular brand values and then how people perceive us. As I say, separate from simply making sure we've got all the trademarks in place and URLs in place and all those sorts of things, so that if we did end up selling the company that acquired us, if they wanted to, could use the brand and leverage the brand.
So before we get to BuzzSumo's sponsor spot, which is great to have you on the line for this, actually, because we can talk very natively about that. I wanted to ask, does BuzzSumo have a best social platform in terms of engagement or awareness or even referral traffic? Do you have a good social platform?
What's been interesting is we've been looking at where referrals come from. And I suppose we initially thought that it would be more Twitter or LinkedIn. It's now fairly even across the three platforms. We're getting a lot more referrals from Facebook than we expected. So we're getting a lot of activity, whether that's because Facebook is huge, I'm not entirely sure. But we're a business-to-business brand, but we get a lot of referrals and traffic through from Facebook. Twitter is declining a little bit, but it's been a fairly major one for us. The one I'm seeing grow also substantially is LinkedIn. I'm seeing people share a lot more content on LinkedIn. We also see it in our data that people are sharing a lot more on LinkedIn than they were before. So whether that's because they've changed the news feeds, and I've got mixed views on sometimes of the news feed, but we are seeing people use LinkedIn a lot more, and we're seeing a lot more referrals from LinkedIn. But if you just use BuzzSumo, the great thing, obviously, about it, we just type in buzzsumo.com, you can see where our social shares take place, not necessarily the referrals to traffic, but you can see where the social shares take place. And they split broadly a third across those social networks now. But the change has been Facebook, LinkedIn up, Twitter down a bit. But currently we're fairly evenly spread across those. Whereas if you look at the social shares for Moz, it's overwhelmingly Twitter, for example. That's not the case for us, which is slightly interesting.
Is YouTube something you're going to look into in using?
We're not using it as well as we should. I mean, partly because we haven't had any marketing staff other than me and doing a few bits, really. Our marketing is not as sophisticated as it should be, is the honest answer. But we run videos and things on, just how-to videos and things like that on YouTube. But it's not a big channel for us at the moment.
So we're going to get into BuzzSumo, the second sponsor. So thank you, Steve, for being a sponsor of the show. It's been great having you, being able to talk about the tools. Bloomberry, you mentioned. I love Bloomberry. The second Henley sent that tool to me and I tried it out. I was tweeting it, and it's part of my regular keyword research workflow as well. And I just made a video that includes it, which I can send you the link, by the way. But what I wanted to ask, since I have you on the line, Steve, is one feature that I personally have not really quite leveraged, I think, as good as I can, is the influencers feature in BuzzSumo. If I go to BuzzSumo, which I'm on it right now, and let's say I just type SEO in the influencers section, I tend to maybe feel a little overwhelmed by how many results I'm getting here, which speaks to the volume of data and information that you have here. But how can I and other people better leverage this influencer search feature to really dig to like the exact people that they might want to reach out to?
Yeah, there are two things I do there. I think that the main influencer feature is often people who are new to an area, who just want to find influencers. I'd say there are a couple of approaches I would take for you. And the first is to do a most shared search. If you do a most shared search on BuzzSumo, what you will see quite quickly is a list of content, but there's a little button saying view sharers. So if you're after something really specific, local SEO, hyper-local SEO, or something like that, find the most shared articles and then look at who shared that on Twitter, who amplified it. So I will often use that rather than a Twitter influencer search. I'd actually find content that's really relevant to what I'm doing, and then I'd see who shared it, who amplified it, and then you can export those lists. So firstly, I'd start there necessarily rather than the influencer list itself. The other thing is on the Twitter influencers, you'll see there's a little tab called Search Content Shared.
Yes.
And that's really useful. You can type in any keyword there. So again, local SEO, whatever. And then we'll show you everyone who's shared articles about that topic. We'll even show you the articles they've shared. But sometimes I've seen people do this very well. There's a domain feature there as well. So you can type in moz.com for the past month, and we'll show you everyone who's shared content from Moz, for example. Or you can put in your 4 main competitors, and we'll show you everybody who's shared content from your 4 main competitors. And then you can see, are they people you should be reaching out to yourself, for example? So the Twitter influencer search is useful. I think it's more useful sometimes when you're new to an area. But I think if I want to find really specific influencers, I would look at doing a most shared search. seeing who shared and amplified that content, because then I know that they're very niche to me, really. And I'd also do things like, who's sharing my competitors' content. Sometimes just who's sharing my own content can be useful sometimes to put in your own domain and make sure you've picked up everyone who's sharing your own content there as well and building relationships.
That way you can reach out or email them or thank them or send them a tweet or engage with them.
You've got a really good starting point there. If they've shared your content, that's a great starting point for a conversation, really. So I'd often start there. So I would use those things specifically. The influence search is great, but you again need to be quite specific about what you want. If you just type in SEO, you're going to get a lot. And my other concern is sometimes you just get the big names and they're not necessarily the people you want to build the relationship with. And the other thing which comes as a surprise to people, but there is no relationship between the engagement somebody gets on Twitter and the number of followers they have. I've done analysis after analysis and it's just not there. So we use a figure, as you'll see, called average retweet rate, which is simply based on the number of times you tweet, how many times you get retweeted every time you tweet. And you would think there would be a relationship between how many followers you have and how many retweets you get, but there simply isn't. Sometimes you can find somebody with 5,000 followers who has a really high retweet rate because they have an engaged audience. You can find somebody else who has 1 million followers, has a really low retweet rate because they don't have that well an engaged an audience. And I'm cynical these days about you, but how much time do people spend in their Twitter feeds? How much time do people spend looking at what people are sharing? So I think it's finding influencers who have an engaged audience that matter to you. And that doesn't have to be a huge audience. I mean, say we only have just under 4,000 paying customers in BuzzSumo. If I can find somebody who's got 2,000 more of those, that's fantastic. So it's finding the people who have the right type of audience that you need to work with, really, and who respects them and those sorts of things. So it's not finding people who've got millions of followers. And the danger of just doing the standard search on BuzzSumo is sometimes you just get a lot of the big names. Type in content marketing and you'll get Joe Paluzzi and all these people. But it might be better to say, actually, I'm really interested in a very niche form of content marketing. I do a most shared search around that. And then I see who shared that content, who's amplifying it. Then I start to build a relationship with those people. So that's what I would do. I wouldn't necessarily start with the mainstream Twitter influencers.
I think you pointed out what I was doing incorrectly there. And by the way, that's the most valuable sponsor spot I think anybody will ever hear, because we have the actual person from the sponsor on the show. So that's my cue. That is the end of the sponsor spot, just so listeners. While recording this with Steve, I've completely forgot to mention you can go to buzzsumo.com and enter the discount code DANSHURE, that's DANSHURE, for 30% off 3 months of all of BuzzSumo. A great deal. So that's Dan Shore, SHURE, buzzsumo.com. Okay, back to the interview. But what I want to ask you, Steve, was, is there another marketing tool that you just really love, like their data or like their UI, UX? Is there another tool that you really like a lot?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the tools that I use. I mean, we use standard ones, like we do use Buffer for scheduling and things like that out there. But I'm trying to think in terms of marketing. We pay for so little. That's the downside as well.
So I'll ask it another way. Is there another SaaS company that you really look up to, even just beyond the tool?
Yeah, I mean, I look up to, I don't know if you know a tool called AgoraPulse.
I don't.
Yeah, AgoraPulse, it really is helping you manage all your social activities. And there's a guy called Emmerich who runs that, and I think he's an incredibly thoughtful, clever guy, and a guy that I go to for advice quite a lot when I'm thinking about issues around SaaS. And they've gone through, issues. It's hard to grow the business, but they've managed to grow their business significantly, get it to profitability. And he's got a lot more experience than I have, so I learn a lot from him. So we use the tool, but more importantly, I respect his views in terms of how to run a SaaS business, really. So that's just Emmerich at AgoraPulse. I really take on board advice that he gives me.
Great. I'll link to that in the show notes. So now I want to chat a little bit about content marketing. So I actually BuzzSumo'd you to find popular content that you've created. And so what's interesting actually is that's a way. So are there ways that people have used BuzzSumo that you didn't expect? Because I'm using BuzzSumo as a podcaster to find the content that my guests have written that has done really well, so I know what to ask them. And it makes me look great because they're like, wow, you've really researched me, which I do spend hours and hours researching my guests. But that's sort of it off the pathway that I use the tool. Are there any other sort of unusual uses that you've seen?
Yeah, there are unusual uses all the time. We keep coming across the way people are using the tool, not how we expected. And I'm a bit like you on that. When I'm running webinars with people, one of the things that I look for a lot is what's their most shared content. So I did the recent webinar with Larry Kim, but before I talked to him about it, I searched for his most shared content, and then I found his most shared articles. And I said, why don't we do a webinar around this? Because this clearly resonated with your audience. So I'm doing much the same as you, finding something that really resonated. And then I'm running a webinar around that topic that resonated with their audience, for example. So, yeah, people use it a lot. I mean, some of the big publishers, we didn't expect the big publishers to love it as much as they do. And they love things like the trending section, under content research, the trending section. And so we have big clients from BuzzFeed down, really. But they'll look for a story that's breaking, and we'll show you a story that's breaking within the last 10 minutes or so. They really sit on the 1 hour filter. In trending, if you know trending, there's a 1 hour filter. We'll just show you content published less than an hour ago that's already trending. And then you've got the opportunity to either be the first to share it, the first to comment on it. It's all about building your authority. Or if you've got the resources, write your own version of the story. So people who really leverage trending content really like that particular feature. So that's something I didn't expect as much, really. So publishers use that quite extensively. We know I've got one publisher who actually has that trending feed projected onto the wall of their office, and they've built in a little Google Chrome update thing that refreshes the page. We don't automatically refresh the page for you, so they put one of those in that actually refreshes the page so you can see what's trending. So we probably should build something like that in, really. So people use it in many different ways. The other one that's been really interesting is the Facebook Analyzer. The Facebook Analyzer is where there are just so many gems in BuzzSumo. It's basically most shared, but instead of for blog posts and articles, it's the most shared, or rather most interacted, for Facebook posts. So you can type in, a topic we've got over here called Brexit, or you can type in Donald Trump, or you can type in SaaS pricing, and we'll show you the most interacted with Facebook posts, public posts. We only obviously have access to public posts on that topic, but we've got billions of articles in there, and there's some real gems of data. And what's been interesting in the last few sets of elections is how some of the political analysts have been using our Facebook Analyzer to see the posts that are gaining traction on Facebook. And we can show you what's been gaining traction, in the last 24 hours, for example. And there's so much good stuff in the Facebook Analyzer, and people or various people use it to find popular images, and then they reuse those images in their Facebook posts to get extra traction. Another simple use was our monitoring tool. Our monitoring tool is one of our most powerful features, but people don't know of it. Basically, because we're crawling content all the time, I can put in Steve Rayson there, and every time Steve Rayson's mentioned inside a blog post, not inside a tweet, inside a blog post, we'll let you know within 5-10 minutes of finding that article. And so we track BuzzSumo. I've got a BuzzSumo alert. Every time somebody mentions BuzzSumo inside a post, I get an alert, and then I can comment on it. But actually, Syed Balaki was doing a really clever thing. As soon as you saw people mentioning him, he said, could you tell us, Steve, if they also link to us? So we've now added a feature there, and it will say link, no link. And if it says no link, we'll also show you their domain authority. So say, these people mentioned you, their domain authority is 90, there's no link. And so what he was doing was just getting a fairly junior person, but just to mail them saying, thanks so much for mentioning us, really great. It might be helpful to your users if you added a link. And he was getting over 70% response rate. And so we started doing the same. And so it's a real way. I mean, you know what it's like. Getting links is so hard. But actually, if someone's mentioned you off their own volition, you haven't asked them to, it's a much easier thing to say, look, that's fantastic. If you need anything, let us know. By the way, would you mind adding a link to make it a bit easier for your readers? And we're getting positive responses to that. Not 100%, but we get positive responses. And it's a really easy way. It's like low-hanging fruit. It's a really easy way of gaining backlinks. And now that we've added those features, we'll actually show you, it'll say no link quite clearly if there's no link, and we'll show you what domain authority is. So you can decide which ones you want to follow up on. You might want all of them. You just might want the high authority one. So that's a use of monitoring, which was really just to monitor mentions of your brand or mentions of particular keywords. People using that now to actively seek out backlinks, for example.
That's great. I mean, that's what us SEOs call unlinked mentions. But now we're able to, I could see where that's really strong, powerful to be able to act on that within 5 to 10 minutes of that happening, because I imagine there's like a shelf life of an unlinked mention. If you're reaching out to somebody a month later, you're going to have less luck getting that link versus 10 minutes. What I wanted to ask Steve about was some of these magical content aspects that helps content get links and shares. You have some research here. There's 5 things. I'm going to link to this post in the show notes so people can check out the full article. The biggest one I was surprised about was authoritative posts that answer core questions. Are you saying that this content gets shares or links or both?
It gets both, really. I mean, go back to that Moz research we did. We generally found that some content got shares but no links, and some content got links and few shares. Not surprisingly, I mean, loads of people will share a viral quiz, but very few people ever link to it. And I can show examples of things that had hundreds of thousands of shares and not zero links. So I was always been very interested in what sort of content gets both, because that's what we want, isn't it? We want people to share content and to link to it. And, authoritative research, all those things. But authoritative answers seems to be one of those. People do share authoritative answers to posts, but more importantly, potentially, is they link to it. As long as you're the authoritative answer, people will link to that post.
So one example you have here is what is content marketing? That's one of the posts that seems to have a lot of links and shares. Why do you think people who share, I can see the links, it's a very sort of definition, overview oriented piece of content, but why the sharing, do you think? Do you think it's just such a great resource people want to I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's not something you'd inherently think is that shareable. I mean, what is content marketing? But the evidence does seem to be when there are good answers, people do share them. So whether they're sharing them to inform others within their groups, for example, or other audiences. But there does seem to be that evidence that people share it. But I agree with you. It's not something that seems inherently shareable. It's not like the latest news on something. It's not like the latest research on something. But they appear to both get shares and to get links, which makes them very powerful. I mean, there is a caveat to that, which is you really have to be one of the best answers. There is no point us writing an article on what is content marketing. We're never going to get above the Content Marketing Institute one. But we could take a slight detour and say, we could write an article about what is shareable content, and given our background, we might do very well on that. So you've got to pick your battles in terms of where you're going to do authoritative content. But yes, it is one of those that seems to get both shares and gets links, really. And then the links particularly are important.
What's interesting here is I did a webinar on BuzzStream about what I call intent to link searches, meaning what are the query types that people are in that mode where they're looking for something to link to. So content marketing statistics, right? Usually people are looking for a stat to link to. This is interesting though. This almost seems like content where people, maybe they're not searching with the intent to share, but they're searching for something. They're so impressed or find the answer so helpful that they then share it. Does that seem like what's happening here? And can you tell, is the share behavior on social for something like what is content marketing, is it a big viral spike or is it something that's happening gradually over time?
Yeah, it seems to be gradually over time. Most content when it's published for shares, shares happen much faster than links. So you tend to get a spike and then it tends to ease down. But for some of those posts, it's actually quite consistent. It's quite consistent gain in shares over time. Whereas most articles, it's a bit of a spike, it eases down, and then it slows down quite considerably. We don't find the same with some of those authoritative answer posts. And I think it's partly about your intent, when intent to link really or search, because often people are looking to just reference something. Hey, I'm writing an article about X. I want to just put the link in. So it's content marketing. I can put the link into what is content marketing, or what is quantum physics or whatever it happens to be. Sometimes you want to reference it, and so I think you're finding content that's clearly referential, which enables you to support your article. And in that space, you might then decide, actually, I would share that as well. It's useful for people to see that content as well. So, it's an interesting one. But you're definitely right about research authoritative stuff. I mean, if you look at Pew Research, they're fantastic link ranks, for example, because they're doing unique research reports. And I find it on my own. I mean, BuzzSumo, we're a small site relatively in terms of our blog. But, I wrote one on how to go viral lessons from most shared content. Because it was a piece of research, 220 unique linking domains back to that article. For a small site like us, that's great. 200 links for a single article. And another one I did, 50% of content gets 8 shares or less. It's research. It got, again, about 250 links there, for example. People definitely link to research in a way that they don't to other articles. And you can see, if you look at social media, examiner.com, they get lots and lots of shares, but I can guarantee you that their annual research report will have the most links. So you'll go down that list and you'll see it, and bang, it'll stand out. Their research report will have masses of links because, again, it's something you can reference, and people will reference the stats inside it. So, yeah, I think research content is incredibly powerful in establishing authority and establishing links.
I may be opening a big can of worms here, but I want to ask about more content. And it's interesting, Roberto Blake, who's somebody who's been on this podcast, he's very well known in the YouTube space. He just did a video about why he thinks people should be doing more content, because you always hear this thing that quality over quantity and people are getting inundated with content. And you look at somebody like Gary Vaynerchuk, and the guy is just a content. I mean, he has a team, obviously, right? But he has a daily vlog. They do Ask Gary V. He's putting out articles, and he's got his podcast. I mean, he has enough content that if all you do is consume his stuff, it would take up all of your time. So I'm seeing this trend go back in the other direction, and your article jumped out at me as well. I haven't really read much of the article. I just thought it would make for a nice discussion here. So why is it that your stance here is people should be thinking about doing more content, not less?
Primarily because of what you say. I mean, it seems to work. I mean, I just look at the data, and when I talk to content marketers, we all say the same thing. Sure, we want to focus on higher quality, less of it, higher quality. We can really then market that well, etc. But actually, when you look at some of the other sites, and I'm talking about sites that have got a fairly established authority, so you can't do it immediately, but I think you get to a point of having a sufficient audience, suddenly you can accelerate the amount of content. And when you look at the data, what the data suggests is actually, once you get to a certain size, you just want to publish more. Not necessarily thousands of posts a day, but if you start doing one a day as opposed to one a week, that overall can drive up your traffic a lot. And so I've just been looking at the data, and that's what the data suggests, really, is that once you get to a certain size, you can publish more content. Now, it's controversial because people say, but aren't we going to get covered in rubbish content, etc.? I'm not sure, because there's so many ways you can write content. I mean, but it's happening anyway. There's no question the future is more content, because it's getting easier to write content. There are more people on the internet. It's much easier to produce video now than it ever was. More and more content is being produced. I just track the number of WordPress blog posts, and it's just sort of going through the roof, really. The Wall Street Journal now publishes over 1,000 articles a day. So you can't even read one newspaper in a day because there's so many articles. But what's been really interesting is I've been following Jeff Bezos and stuff, and since he took over the Post and things, because I think what he's doing is something similar to Amazon, which is long tail. It's you can write your blockbuster posts or your blockbuster books, but actually there's a really long tail of people who are interested in synchronized swimming or carp fishing or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
And so actually you can cater to a niche audience with lots of content in a way you just can't. If you're publishing one post a week, you can't cater to that. So you're catering for your bigger audiences, and that's fine. You'll get bigger audiences. But there is a long tail. I think that long tail theory works. It works for Amazon on books, for example. Most of their sales are not from the blockbusters. They're from the long tail there. And what Bezos has got them doing is using technology and using algorithms to write stories. And that's scary for content marketers. But actually, algorithms do write stories now. So I think something like most of their financial reports initially are written by algorithms. They just take all the data, write the results up, and then you edit them.
Wait a second. So the actual contents of the article is not written by a human being?
Well, no. In fact, on the Associated Press and financial reports, I think they're almost exclusively not, almost 100% written not by humans on the financial reports. But I think on other sites like Wall Street Journal, etc., often the algorithm creates the first draft and then it's edited. But the algorithm can take, Apple's results instantly, and it can turn it into a post saying this is the best results for the last 6 months. It's up 10%, etc. It can take all of that stuff and write the story very quickly. And these tools are getting better. There are companies like Automated Insights, Narrative Science. Narrative Science is a good one. If your users, because I have Google Analytics, if you go to Narrative Science, you can sign up and get a free analytics report that an algorithm will write you. You just have to give it access to your analytics account. It will write you a weekly analytics report saying you did well this, you need to look at that. And it's scary for agencies, but actually anything which is generally data-driven, algorithms can take that data and can write you articles based around data. Now, it's not the same as an opinion post, but things like baseball scores, it can be great, or synchronized swimming. The newspaper couldn't cover that, but actually an algorithm can just take those scores and turn it into a written post. So, last night's synchronized swimming results were Joe won. This was her best result for 2 years. It's all done by data. It doesn't need to touch a human, really. But that enables you to reach long-tail audiences. And I think that's an interesting area. And I think we will see algorithms get better and better, and we're going to see more content written by algorithms. But and if you don't believe me, do go to sites like Narrative Science or Automated Insights. They've got free algorithms that you can use, and you can give it data like your analytics report, and it will write you articles based on your data.
Wow. So we're going to get to the wrap up in just a moment. I sort of feel like the more algorithmic we get with content creation, the more human we have to be as marketers. I've seen this on Twitter. I mean, Twitter is just, my Twitter feed is 50% or more scheduled tweets, you can tell. And people not being human, people not replying. Some people probably, as a human being, have not logged into their Twitter account in a long time. They just schedule everything. So I sort of feel like to be successful at marketing and business, I mean, don't we need to get even, to hedge against that, don't we need to be more human in a certain way?
I think it's probably a combination of both, if I'm honest. I mean, we all need algorithms to just understand our world, I think. I mean, another little tool I run is something called Anders Pink, which is just a personal project, which is, there's so much news. How do you find what you want? And I use algorithms there to just skim the content, filter out what it thinks is relevant to me. And I'm having to use algorithms to do that because it's just, 8 million blog posts published today. I don't have time to even skim them. So I need to find ways of filtering. And that can be, the little Anti-Spink tool that I've got. It can look at what my friends have shared, what I've said is important, and it filters out based on a number of those factors. So you need algorithms to help you. We might need algorithms to help us write base content, but you're then right, I think, is then there's a human element. It's a bit like curation. You don't want a bot curating everything for you, but a bot may filter the first round for you, and then you'll humanly curate and comment and add context, etc. So there's a balance of both, but I do think you need to be human. And I think it's interesting. I think some of the posts I see being very successful now are quite controversial. And I think that's because they're a bit more human, because people do get stuck into a proper debate, etc. They take a viewpoint. And I think that can be successful these days. A way to stand out is not just, please don't give me another 5 ways to improve my landing pages. Nobody wants to read this stuff. But actually something which is controversial, opinionated, that's much more human. And I think that cuts through a lot more these days, in my personal view.
So I want to wrap up things in just a moment here. You mentioned earlier that you just recently started bringing in a sales staff. I'm curious, why sales and not some other form of marketing? And what is that sales staff going to be focusing on? Okay.
I mean, sales, because we're not short of leads. Even I'd have to look at the numbers, but typically most days we get 450 people sign up to the freemium plan. So that's a typical day. About 450, and it's been remarkably consistent for years. I keep expecting it to change, but it's remarkably consistent. I'll have a look as we talk to see what it was yesterday. Although yesterday was a Sunday, so it's not quite so good. But so we have no shortage of leads, really. So often you get these people approaching you saying, "Would you like lots of leads, Steve?" And it's like, well, not really, because we haven't got the time to do anything with them anyway. So we don't need lots of leads in that sense. But we have a lot of leads. So what we're trying to focus on are, within those 460 who signed up yesterday, who could be good clients for us? Who should we be offering webinars to? Who should we talk to? I mean, previously, we've just never reached out to people. You'd have signed up. You'd have played with the tool. That's, you might have had a few automated drip messages, but that's probably about it. So we're now trying to think about how do we actively target customers who would really benefit from the app. And the other side is, there are a lot of people using it on our pro plan, but we have an agency and an enterprise plan, and there are lots of them that would benefit from stepping up to agency and using our Facebook analyzer, etc. So we're really looking at the salespeople to improve the conversions from lead to conversion and improve the upgrade path. And also just to provide more webinars and things to stop churn. Churn is the really hard thing in any SaaS business. We have reasonable levels of churn, partly because we're a research tool. People come in, they do 2 months of research for a project, then they're gone. Then they come back again. We have a lot of people who come back. Churn is a killer. So also being able to provide more webinars and support, we're hoping will have some impact on churn, although it's not an easy one to solve. So that's why sales. When because of the freemium product we have, we're really not short of leads. Now, maybe we could get more targeted leads, but at the moment we've got over 300,000 names in the database that we haven't even actively approached, and we can see people who are using the tool, etc. So leads isn't something we're short of. It's how do we prioritize focus and then get in touch with those people.
So as you can probably hear me fading in the outro music here, my music, by the way, fun little fact. What I want to ask Steve is tell us where people can find you online, Twitter, LinkedIn, and also just to wrap things up, any future vision of BuzzSumo or anything that you want to tell people about that might be coming down the pipeline, or really anything at all looking forward into the future.
Okay, yeah, sure. People can get me. I'm just at Steve Rayson on Twitter, which is Rayson. They can get me via email, steve@buzzsumo.com. In terms of BuzzSumo, the Bloomberry tool, we're actually folding into the main BuzzSumo product. We're building a question analyzer so you can see the most asked questions for any topic. We're also building in projects so that you can actually upload sets of URLs and see how well content for campaigns is done over time, for example. We're doing sort of new content audit tools. So you can put in a domain, we can show you what's the best content, what's been working, best authors, etc. So we're always trying to add new features and tools. So they're really more analysis tools. But the big new add-on will be the question analyzer, which will go into BuzzSumo and be around certainly by September.
Oh, that's really good news. Like I said, I love that tool, Bloomberry. So for now, people can find that at bloomberry.com, but eventually that's the one you're talking about, right?
We'll keep a free version of it, but the more advanced paid version will sit inside the BuzzSumo app.
Excellent. Well, Steve, thank you so much for joining us on Experts in the Wire. I had a lot of fun meeting you and chatting with you. I'm going to fade up the music here, and we'll see everyone next time on Experts on the Wire.